Police and emergency services cordoned off the Hunter Waterboard depot on Fletcher Street at about 9:30 when they saw power lines drape the length of the roadside. Witnesses say the drama began when a truck left the depot with its mobile crane still raised. Waterboard employees were aware of the danger as soon as the truck left the depot. In a desperate measure, they tried to contact the driver on a two-way just as the crane hit the power lines. Residents heard the blast from hundreds of metres.
I heard a loud bang. Looked out the window and there's blue sparks flying everywhere. Next thing I knew, there was no lights in the place.
The crane cut through both high and low voltage lines. The power surge blew out a switchboard at the neighbouring St Pius X College. All 750 students were swiftly evacuated until electricians gave the all clear. Sections of Katara, New Lambton and Adamstown were blacked out for up to half an hour as linesmen switched in alternative grid supplies. But for businesses closer to the scene, work was over before it started.
There won't be any concrete production today, that's for sure.
The interruption alarmed businesses in a nearby light industrial zone. This plastic extrusion workshop faced a damage bill totalling tens of thousands of dollars if the power supply had been delayed any longer.
We've got a lot of very, very expensive equipment here. With a shutdown, the plastic can set hard in the machines and cause a lot of damage.
A spokesman for Shortland Electricity said temporary repairs would be completed this evening, but full restoration of the power services would be a long-term project. Tom Hilston, NBN News. The Fresh Ocean is a regular caller to Newcastle and had just loaded 15,000 tonnes of coal for Japan when marine surveyors inspected the vessel and found serious shortcomings in safety equipment. Work crews were busy today replacing badly corroded fire lines, upgrading lifeboat davits and repairing faulty toilet plumbing. The repairs will cost about $50,000 and should be completed this weekend. A Department of Transport spokesman said the vessel was structurally sound, but clearance for departure was withheld until the ship met internationally agreed safety standards. The spokesman said it was not anticipated that the vessel's owners would have problems meeting the requirements, unlike the Vietnamese ship Tan Binh, which was provisionally detained for several months before leaving the port without clearance.
The alarm was raised about 7 o'clock last night after the single-engine Cherokee was reported several hours overdue on a flight from Mudgee to Coffs Harbour. The plane had departed Mudgee around 2:45, having stopped off there after flying out of Bendigo earlier that morning. Last radio contact with the plane was made at 4:45 over Smoky Cape Lighthouse, 70 kilometres south of Coffs Harbour. Several hours later, another plane flying in the area reported receiving a distress signal from the missing craft's emergency beacon. Several rescue helicopters, including the NBN Westpac chopper, were dispatched to the area, but high winds forced them to abandon the search around 11:30 last night. The mission was resumed several hours later, with a helicopter eventually locating the wreckage about 3:30 a.m. in Swampland, just north of Kempsey. Civil aviation officials have confirmed bodies of 3 of the occupants have been found. A 4th is still unaccounted for. Ground crews are attempting to reach the scene, but it's believed bulldozers will have to be called in to clear a path for the vehicles. All 4 passengers were from Victoria. They are thought to have been en route to a major Rotary conference in Coffs Harbour this weekend.
It took just seconds for fire to tear through this derelict house on Reserve Creek Road, Bullaroo. The gusty winds fuelled small spot fires in the building and threatened to blow the iron roofing into the street. The property, owned by Lake Macquarie Council, had been empty for some time. It's thought children playing in the area may have started the blaze. At Argenton, houses in Montgomery Street were surrounded by smoke from a grass fire near the railway line. The biggest fear was that the wind would spur the fire through the dry grass and across the line. However, it was soon brought under control. And residents of Bar Beach were without power for most of the morning as wind gusts brought down three 11,000-volt lines onto Fenton Avenue and Memorial Drive. Power, though, was restored by mid-afternoon. The coach was freed 7 hours after skidding into a drain while negotiating a bend on the notorious section of the Pacific Highway. While there was only minor damage to the coach, no amount of pushing would move it until a specialised heavy vehicle towing service was brought in. Police have charged the driver with negligent driving. No one was injured, although 20 passengers on board spent an uncomfortable night waiting for another coach to ferry them to Sydney. Last week, 6 people were hurt when a semi-trailer lost its load of toxic chemicals and crashed into another truck on the same stretch of the road. The highway was closed for 24 hours as rescue workers cleared the volatile pesticide. The Roads and Traffic Authority has proposed a new route east of O'Sullivan's Gap. 30 submissions have been received to build the new dual carriageway. The Bandicoot was sailing from Cairns to Sydney with its sister ship, the Wallaroo, when it broke its rudder and was left without steering early this morning. The Newcastle tug Iron Cove went to its assistance, but a 10-metre swell and 40 to 50 knot winds made the task of towing difficult. The tow rope broke and all on board the tug were needed to reel the heavy link in. With conditions worsening throughout the day, the Wallaroo's skipper decided to head back into Port Stephens, leaving the Iron Cove and Bandicoot sheltering behind Broughton Island. Late this afternoon, the Iron Cove was also forced into Port Stephens after a rope snagged its propeller. With a New Zealand frigate, the Wellington, on its way from Sydney and another tug leaving Newcastle tonight, it's hoped the Bandicoot will be under tow by first light. Over the last 5 weeks, the joint coal board at Warners Bay has been the target of frequent vandalism. Windows have been smashed and graffiti sprayed on walls. The building was last night being patrolled by guards from Webster's security service.
I noticed that there was some crackling noise and the smell of smoke. So on investigating that, I realised that it was in fact a fire within the building. And I contacted the police and the fire brigade and commenced to put out the fire.
The fire did not take hold and quick action from the men prevented any major damage. Early this morning, a 22-year-old Belmont man employed by a different security company was questioned by police in connection with this incident and 4 other fires in the Gateshead area. He will appear in Belmont Local Court on November the 8th.
In choppy surf that was difficult to judge, Chad Edser was the master of the first semi-final. His wave selection was near perfect as he reeled off 2 rides to score 9.3 and 9 respectively. Edser was able to link up with the shore break and milk every ounce out of each wave. A tense battle developed for second place and a spot in the final between 15-year-old Gromit Beau Emerton and seasoned campaigner Damien Iredale. As state amateur champion, Iredale looked to have the spot sewn up, but the tenacious youngster surprised everyone despite some difficulties in the choppy conditions, and he joined Edser in the grand final. The second semi-final was a thrilling contest, although Craig McMillan made sure of his place in the final with a powerhouse display. With a second placing in the World Amateur title under his belt, McMillan was after a win in his home city, and with his performance in the semis, he started as one of the favourites to take out the title. The second surfer to go through wasn't known for some time, as Shane Powell, Lee Holmes and Justin Lee staged a remarkable battle which saw all three tied towards the end. But the nod went to Shane Powell, and it was a Merriweather quadrella in the final. Again, Chad Edser opened brilliantly, grabbing a snaking left-hander that allowed the youngster to surf to the beach and put the pressure on the others. Edmonton and McMillan struggled a little in the final, and it was Shane Powell who issued the challenge to Edser. Powell has had plenty of experience in pressure situations, and with a win over reigning world champion Martin Potter in this year's Coke Classic to his name, his expertise impressed the judges, and he has become this year's Newcastle Surf Classic champion. In second place was Edser, followed by McMillan and Edmonton. Cessnock's Jamie Plum maintained his winning style, taking out the Stars' invitation from experienced Sean Wilmot, while Darren Etheridge was lucky to walk away from a fall that could have been more serious except for the exceptional skills of Ian Wedgwood. In the Tui's final, Wilmot came back to win from Plum, and another fall from Etheridge saw him taken to hospital with an arm injury. In the sidecars, Queenslander Wayne Monkey was too good, winning all three early races, but Doc Fulp and Wayne Galvin upstaged the interstate pairing to grab the 2HD feature final. "150 exponents of traditional karate took part in the Hunter Valley Championships at the Broadmeadow Basketball Stadium today, and it was a clean sweep for the Australian representatives who were guest competitors. Greg Taylor from the Central Coast was too strong in the Open Men's division, and Kim Chinook dominated the Open Women's event. Both Greg and Kim were using the titles as a build-up to the World Championships to be held in Mexico later this month.
Today was to have been a special day for Year 12 students at Raymond Terrace High as they celebrated their second last day of school, but instead it was spent cleaning up the remains of a muck-up night that went drastically wrong. Most of the 109 students left the school around 5:30 yesterday afternoon after decorating the quadrangle in preparation for today's school assembly. However, shortly after midnight, neighbours called police when they heard shattering glass and yells coming from the grounds. When police arrived, they found the school in disarray. Windows broken, lights smashed, doors kicked in, rubbish strewn around the grounds, and graffiti sprayed on walls and fences. 24 people were detained by police. Although some were students, most were from outside the school.
We've got slightly over 100 students in Year 12, and I'd write very good references for 80 or 85 of them, and it's just really disappointing to think that so many of those willing, able and cooperative people are likely to be penalised for the actions of a very small number.
Unfortunately, those students not involved in the rampage will also be punished. Tomorrow's presentation assembly is in jeopardy and the school formal has been cancelled. Year 11 will also feel the effects.
Year 11 will learn very quickly, well before the end of this year, that Raymond Terrace has seen the last of its muck-up days.
Mr. Packer's very public heart attack and amazing recovery has highlighted the need for defibrillators as a life-saving device. When used in conjunction with CPR, the device can see up to 35% of patients make a full recovery. In the treatment of heart attack, it's the work done on the patient in the first few minutes which can make all the difference. Mr. Packer's offer to the state government to share the cost of fitting the machines to every ambulance in New South Wales is seen as a breakthrough.
It's probably one of the most important breakthroughs that we've had in the ambulance service. To be able to defibrillate patients that have had heart attacks, where previously it was only done in the first place in hospitals and then with our paramedics.
There are 95 ambulances in the Hunter. Apart from the paramedic units, there are only 2 of these defibrillators already in service, one at Cessnock and the other at Beresfield. The unit, which will be purchased, is called a Heart Start 3000. It's a semi-automatic machine which every ambulanceman will be trained to use.
As these electrodes are put onto the patient's chest, an electric shock is then administered to the patient. This stops the fibrillation, and they receive another shock after that, and hopefully, and most times, the heart will restart again.
At a cost of more than $10,000 each, the Hunter's ambulances will take about 6 months to fully equip. The move has the potential of saving hundreds of lives each year in this region alone. John Church, NBN News.
They took to sailing like ducks to water, their lack of sight less of a handicap than the gusts of wind that sent them tumbling. It took a while to get the hang of the ropes, but once they got the feel of things, the lake and the Department of Education camp at Point Wollstonecroft opened up a wealth of new experiences.
Many of the children, because of their handicap, are quite often sheltered in many ways, and as you say, for many of the children it's their first time away from home. We were talking about one example this morning of a child, first time he's ever put toothpaste on his toothbrush, which, just little things like that will be happening right throughout the week.
A big challenge was the ropes course, where feel, balance and sheer determination were essential. Total blindness did not stop this young lad, who gave it a go and hung on in there to the end. And once back on the ground, they all agreed they had learnt something special.
I think it's terrific, and you get some self-independence. It's very breathtaking, and it's just a great achievement, I suppose.
Maria, what do you think you got out of doing this today?
Balance. I don't know, it was just fun.
Abseiling lent itself to an even more breathtaking challenge. Backward steps marking a great leap forward in personal achievement.
Well, many of the things we're doing, it's a one-off experience for these children, and in a normal program it's quite exciting for the children that are involved in it, but with these children, because of their visual impairment, it adds that little extra degree of accomplishment and personal satisfaction in achieving something rather special.
Ray Williams, at 83 years young, has been competing in sporting events for as long as he can remember, and at the third Masters Games in Alice Springs, he logged more gold medal wins. Williams won gold in the 50 metres freestyle and the 50 metres breaststroke. He also dominated his age group on the track, taking gold in the 3,000 metres and 100 metres dash. From Stockton, Williams is one of the oldest competitors at the Games, and his success is on top of wins at previous Masters Games in Tasmania and South Australia.
Maitland Council's weed inspector Tony Livingston spends most of his time looking for killers. There are 57 noxious weeds in New South Wales. This leafy bush, green cestrum, is just one of them. According to farmer Jack Ellicott, the cestrum has poisoned 3 of his cattle in the last 15 months. So it's a pretty serious problem for you?
Certainly. About $1,500 down the drain.
Jack sprays and chips the cestrum when he can, but after a flood, seeds are washed down the river and the plant comes up in plague proportions. With the launch of Weeds Awareness Week, the Department of Agriculture is called on landowners, both in the country and the city, to be aware of potential dangers. Green cestrum, for example, is quite common in Newcastle gardens.
We've got to be active now and stop those things spreading.
And a word of warning from council inspectors, these weeds may not only be noxious for animals and the environment, but also poisoning for the pocket.
Well, there is a fine of up to $2,000 at the moment for failing to control noxious plants.
Peter Ryan, NBN News.
The celebrity race can often prove more exciting than the Grand Prix itself. Last year, some of Australia's best-known identities came to grief on the slippery track. Joining the lineup this year is Flight Lieutenant Mel Hutfeld. Like Tom Cruise of Days of Thunder, this Top Gun is swapping his wings for the racetrack. In a few weeks' time, Flight Lieutenant Hutfeld will be hugging the corners of the Adelaide circuit. He's already had one training session with former world champion Alan Jones, and as a flight instructor, found the teaching techniques very different.
A lot of it is, I'll show you how to do it, then you have a go, and when you spin off the track, you sort of work out the errors you've made. Here we try and prevent people making too many errors. Can become a little dicey in that case. I guess in the racing scene, a lot of it's learned by experience as well.
But believe it or not, that's where the differences end. According to Flight Lieutenant Hutfeld, everything else is relative.
As you get closer to the ground, the speed becomes much more a player, and in a vehicle, only 2 or 3 feet off the ground, then yeah, the faster you go on the ground, that close, it becomes quite exciting.
When Flight Lieutenant Hutfeld joins identities such as Jane Fleming, Dermot Brereton, Grant Canny and Tracy Grimshaw on the track, he will have one very important advantage. He's used to speed. His FA-18 can reach 2,000 kilometres per hour, 10 times faster than what he's likely to go on the track. In Newcastle, it was a quieter protest. Around 140 academics met at 1 o'clock and decided to stay out for the rest of the day. In support of the action, the Student Representative Council advised students to boycott lectures.
And it helps our cause in the sense that this is a general protest against conditions in higher education, and the students suffer the poor conditions just as much as we do. Large classes, in the long run, the recruitment of less able staff, who are not as dedicated or as committed or as even as comfortable in their jobs as they might otherwise be. The students suffer in the long run just as we suffer.
Although basically on par with teachers' salaries, the academics say they want better pay and conditions.
Essentially, the government's changed the playing field. The government's moved in to amalgamate colleges and universities into a national unified system, and we sought then to have our conditions of work affected by award restructuring. In those award restructuring negotiations, the AHEIA, the Employers Association, we believe has been not cooperative, and what they're proposing does not redress our problems.
The meeting endorsed future industrial action, including possible disruption to exam results and enrolment sessions for next year.